My name is Stephanie Hofmann. It is June 18th, 2018. We are here with Ty Marshall, and we're here in your office on the Linfield campus. And our first question for you is, why theater?
Wow, that's cool. That's a question. That's a long story too. I didn't know what theater was about when I was in high school, and I wasn't sure I was going to go to college at all. I had a guidance counselor in high school that kept pushing and pushing and pushing to make me think about going to college. And I finally, to get her off my back, one day I was in her office and she said, "You can go anywhere in the country to go to college. Where would you like to go?" And I am in Connecticut, so New England, Northeast. She pulled out a map, said you can go anywhere. I literally closed my eyes and I put my finger down on a map and it ended up in Texas. From there, she said, "Well, why don't you go to a community college? See if college is what you really want to do." And so I chose a couple of community colleges based on my interest at the time, which was industrial arts types of things. Shop, woodworking, painting, drafting. And so I chose two junior colleges that had industrial arts programs. I applied to both, was accepted to both, and then I needed to make another decision which one to go to. And so I closed my eyes again. I put my but we narrowed it down to the state of Texas, and I put my finger down and it came closest to this one school, just outside of Houston. And I headed down there and I walked in to introduce myself, and I'm here to register for classes. Well, they had discontinued the program and I didn't have a clue that they had done that. And I was 2,200 miles away from home trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I thought, well, I'm here, I'm going to take some classes. My roommate was in theater. He was the only person that I knew on campus. So when I finished with classes, I would go down to the theater and see what was going on down there. Well, I walk in and I look around and people are building things, painting things, drawing things, obviously acting and so on. And I thought, well, you know, this is including a lot of the things that I'm interested in. And from there, I just started going down more and more and got interested in theater. And that's where it all started. And I was going to transfer from this junior college to a four-year school. This was in the early 70s. I lost my college deferment at that time, was going to be drafted, so I took a four-year hiatus from college and went into the service. I was in the Coast Guard for 4 years, came back out of the Coast Guard and decided, well, I need to see if college is still what I want to do and if theater was what I wanted to do. And went back and started the process again, and one thing led to another, and that's kind of how I got started in theater. I just didn't have a clue about that potential out there. Mm-hmm. And since that point in time, when I was an undergraduate at North Texas, my senior year, as a senior, I did the scenic design for 6 main stage shows. That really showed me that that's what I wanted to do, and applied to grad school. By that time, I had met my future wife. We got married. She wanted to get a PhD, so we had to look around for a school that would allow us to have a chance to do 2 degrees at the same time. So we went to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. She worked on her PhD, and I got my MFA in scenic design. So that's the long story.
Long story how you got there.
Of how I got to theater.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll stick with it for a while.
I guess so. Yeah. We've already done it this long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you go back a little bit? You said that you did the set design for the 6 main stage plays. Can you talk about the process of doing your first full set design and what the challenges were with that?
The first show I ever designed was a play called Once More with Feeling. And it was the scholarship show for the department. And Tom Hughes and Martha Gaylord were two Dallasites that were involved in theater. Tom Hughes was the production manager, producing manager, artistic director of the Dallas Summer Musicals. And Martha Gaylord was an actress in Dallas. Tom was a graduate of North Texas, and so part of his giving back was to create the scholarship production. And I was the first student that was invited to design this scholarship show, which at that point in time had probably been in existence 6 or 7 years or so. So that was quite an honor to be asked to do that. The play had 3 sets. The first act, first scene set took place in a dingy symphony dressing room for the conductor. And the second scene in the first act was his penthouse apartment, and I believe this was in Chicago. And so in 30 seconds, we had to go from this dingy, run-down dressing room to this beautiful penthouse apartment. And the act curtain went down, people backstage changed everything, and act curtain went back up, and there we were in this place. And that was, it was quite a trick to be able to get that accomplished in approximately 30 seconds. But the opportunity that gave me to design at that particular level, to also have a chance to work with some people from Dallas because of Tom's connections. He arranged for a scenic artist to come up 2 or 3 times and help me with painting, and while we did most of the painting, he came up and really helped talk about details and little things like that. He allowed me to go shopping in Dallas and procure props and set dressings, especially for that second set in the penthouse apartment. It needed to really look pretty spectacular. So we had a grand piano and lots of flowers and lots of dressing around, and it was really quite a production. And so that really set the stage, so to speak, on saying this is what I wanted to do. And the availability that he made to me as a undergraduate student really helped me cement this whole thing. And anytime you do a production, it's a collaborative art, and we're always working with other people. And so working with directors and actors, I'll never forget, I didn't have a clue how wide to make a set of stairs, and so I just thought, well, I'll make a step maybe 9 inches wide, and that's enough for people to walk up and down. And in rehearsal, he motions me to come over, and he said, these stairs, just so that you know, these stairs are too narrow. I am, and I don't know, he was about 6'4", 6'5", and he had large feet, and when he was walking down the steps, he couldn't put the ball of his foot on the stair tread easily without his heel hitting the rise behind the stair. And I made a mental note, well, from now on you make your stairs deeper so that actors can walk up and down. And so it's all part of that learning process of and collaboration, working with actors and directors and other designers too, to make something happen. So that's a little bit about that first show that I did. That was really kind of a neat thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
During when you were there, and then whenever you went to Illinois, were there any other shows that really stood out from your time there?
Oh, let's see. Well, I was able to work with a number of different directors, faculty directors, and guest directors that helped me learn how this whole process of designing and working as a collaborative member of a team work. And One other instance was Tom would also allow or create environments for guest artists to come in and do master classes for students. And even as an undergraduate, I was able to do master classes with some of these people that came in. A woman by the name of Lucia Victor, who was the first female playwright on Broadway, came in to direct a couple of shows. And I designed lights for one of those shows. And working with her and learning about different angles and different textures that you can put into lights to help create an environment, again, was a major learning experience and helped me develop an eye for the total package that an audience member sees. And it's not unusual for scenic designers and lighting designers to be the same person. Although you can, and as you raise up in doing Broadway and professional shows, they'll be separate people because they are major jobs, and there's lots of different elements that are associated with each one. But in educational theater and community theater and small theaters, Portland, ART, sometimes you'll have the same same scenic and lighting designer. But even if you have a second person, you need to communicate whatever that other element is, whatever that other design thought is. And as a scenic designer, you're coming up with an environment that you're working in. And as a lighting designer, you're trying to create the illumination that would be seen in that type of environment. And so you have to talk back and forth, talk about the types of light sources you might have in a place. And if, as a scenic designer, you may create lighting fixtures or design certain lighting fixtures into the environment. Or you may have windows or other things that will allow a lighting designer then to help reinforce that environment from a lighting standpoint. So that communication that you have and that experience working with Lucia Victor to be able to fully grasp or more fully grasp what that lighting design element gives to a production was again a tremendous experience. I remember our Tech Without Actors took place over 2.5 days and was a total of 17 hours. And those 17 hours have stuck with me until the last show that I designed here. All of these things that I just talked about are things that I always think about when I'm working in trying to create an environment for a play. And even though I started learning those elements back then, those ideas back then, I still learn today from actors and directors about how they think about and how they want to use use an environment in a play. And if I can start through the design process to use certain things that other people have said that they wanted to have in a place, then it makes the play a little bit more full, makes the environment a little bit more full. I designed a Raisin in the Sun at ART in Portland 10, 12 years ago. And one of the best compliments that I got was from an actor who came up to me after opening night, and he said, "I really like working in this environment because when I walk out the door and I slam the door, it sounds like a door. It sounds like the slamming of a door, and not everything shakes." And just that little bit of a touch of something that most people wouldn't even think about or think was important, for that actor at that time, it was an important thing to feel. And I felt good about that. It was not anything that I added in, it was just the way that I help to design things and think about building things to make it have some structural integrity. So, yeah.
Were there any other mentors during that time whose lessons have carried with you?
Oh, yeah. There's two pictures of two gentlemen on my desk. One is Jerry Long, and the other one is Darwin Payne. And Jerry Long was that faculty member at the community college that really helped to show me where my skills and my talents could fit into theater. And so I consider him my first theater father in that regard. The second person was Darwin Reed Payne, who was my mentor in grad school, and he literally wrote the book on model making, and that's how he taught, was the use of making models. And I have obviously taken on that skill set. I think that it's really important when talking with a director and other designers to be able to see in scale what the finished product of a set's going to be. And by making a model and trying to make it fairly detailed so you can start to fully grasp and understand what the finished product is going to be from the paint and the palette that you're going to choose. Costume designer really wants to see that, and the lighting designer wants to see that. Those types of things help to, in the planning phase, make it more understandable by everybody what we are trying to achieve. And so those two people really helped me in giving me skills and ideas and thoughts to begin doing whatever it is that I do on a particular play. So if it wasn't for those two fellas, I wouldn't be where I am, finishing up a career of 36 years, 31 of them here at Linfield.
Well, speaking of Linfield, how did you find out about this position at Linfield, and what drew you to the college?
That's another story. Brenda and I were both teaching at Central Wyoming College in Riverton, Wyoming, which is a community college. There are 7 community colleges in Wyoming and 1 4-year institution. And at the time, this was like 1984-ish, 85, I guess. There was a chance for me to take on a tenure track position as a scenic designer at the university. And I, in consultation with Brenda, we thought this is probably the thing to do because the legislature really kind of supports the university more than it does the community colleges. And so we figured it may be a better bet to go to Laramie. And so we went to Laramie, and I took a tenure track position there. And Brenda got a job in the comm department. And there were 2 positions that were going to come available for the following fall that she could apply for. And those would be tenure track positions as well. So in the spring, early spring, just before they announced the national search for these 2 positions, one of them, one that she was specifically interested in, was one of 25 faculty members that was cut at the university. And so, well, we weren't sure what we were going to do. And we thought potentially we would split up for a year, and if she could find a job someplace, that she would do that and go wherever. And so she had a number of interviews around the country, and most of them were in the Southeast. And one day, right at the end of the school year, in May, we still didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I went down to get her, and we would go get some lunch. And while I was waiting for her to get out of class, I was reading the Chronicle of Higher Education, and there was this an advertisement for a scenic designer at a little school in Oregon. Well, the day before, the people in the comm department, any job announcement that would come in that might be of interest to Brenda, they put it in her inbox so that she could take a look at it and see if that was something that she was interested in applying for. And the day before, there was a job announcement for this little school in Oregon that was looking for a director of forensics. She didn't think that she was qualified for that, so she threw the job announcement away in the trash can. When she got out of her class, I asked her what school in Oregon was that job announcement for, and so she literally pulled this thing out of the trash can, and she said Linfield College. And I said, well, they're looking for a scenic designer. We need to apply. Whether you think that you're qualified for this or not, this is two jobs in the same place that potentially we could be chosen for. So we both applied, and we were both brought out about the first part of July. She had just come out. She had directed the second show of Summer Stock at Wyoming, and she had just finished her production, and I was just going into the shop for the next two productions, or the last two of the summer. And so we were both invited out for interviews. We were able to come out at the same time over about 3 days. There were members of both search committees that were the same, but each search committee was a little bit different. We interviewed at separate times during those 3 days. We were taken back to the airport and headed back to Laramie. We waited and didn't hear anything for quite a while. And then, I don't know, probably third week of July, near the end of July, we got a phone call saying that, asking if we would both be interested in coming out to Linfield, and we said yes. And we came to Linfield and thinking that we would probably be here 2 or 3, 4 years maybe, because up until that time, that's what we had been. We'd been someplace for a year to replace another couple, another place for 3 years, another place for a year, and so we figured Linfield would be another 2 to 3, 4 year job, and then we would go somewhere else. And 31 years later, well, the first person that's leaving is me. So mm-hmm. It's kind of it's a crazy story.
Yeah.
But you just, we have been blessed, and we've been very lucky that both of us have been able to be employed pretty much at one institution or another, but Linfield especially for now 31 years.
What's it been like working with Brenda in the same department also on different projects?
We are in two completely different disciplines inside the department. Mm-hmm. So she's on the speech comm side, I'm on the theater side. There is some intersection of things, but mainly we are running in separate directions on things. And so that part of it works out pretty well. Even though our offices are next door to each other, we very rarely see each other. Mm-hmm. So, it's different. But it's good. The one thing that we have worked on specifically was the Dory project that we started working on in 2011, which is trying to capture the oral histories of the Dory fleet members in Pacific City. And we started that out with the understanding that we would just interview a few people, and then from those interviews create a script and do a play as part of our season. And we did that in 2012. But then during the middle of the project, the digital commons came online, and it allowed us to expand the scope of what the project is. And so now we are in the process of creating a digital archive of the Dory fleet. And so instead of interviewing maybe 30 or 40 people, right now we have interviewed 106 people. We have only about 475 files online. We've still got thousands of things to get through the pipeline and get put on, but there's still a lot of work to do, and that's going to be one of my projects going into retirement, as I want to spend more time in finishing up things, doing some editing and photoshopping images and things like that. Because now, right as it is, the only time we can work on this project is maybe 6 weeks in the summertime.
Yeah.
And then when school starts, you know, you're back to doing that. Mm-hmm. So I hope to get that pushed further down the road. It's a project that will never be done because it is a living organism. It continues to grow, but we would like to get it further along down the road so that other people can experience a little bit of this Oregon history that some people don't even have a clue is out there. And we've had hits from every state, and I think about 60 countries. So there are people that are going to the archives as it is now, and we hope that that will become even a greater experience moving forward.
Yeah. How did you guys get the idea of interviewing the Dory fleet?
That's another story. Brenda and I were members of a board that was created in Pacific City Arts Association. And our job was to bring arts events into Pacific City, or cultural events into Pacific City. And it was an organization that was in existence for probably 7 or 8 years. And one day Brenda was always trying to figure out how we could make another connection. What could we do as an organization other than to bring things in? But what could we do as an organization that would help develop this culture in PC? And we were walking on the beach, and a boat slid up, and it just dawned on her that Pacific City is, one of the things they say is, it's the home of the Dory fleet. And she said, well, what if we were to start interviewing some people and create a script and do a play? And I said, well, that sounds like a neat idea. One, we'll have to talk with other people in the department, because it was going to incorporate more than just she and I. And we would also need to get some support from other people in Pacific City, namely the Dorymen's Association, and we would also need to get some support from the Pacific City Arts Association. So we went to PCAA first to see what they thought about it. They thought it was a good idea. We talked with our colleagues in the department, and most people thought it was a good idea there. And so then the next thing we had to do was to kind of get the blessing of the people from the Dorymen's Association, of which there have been other organizations that had come to them and said we would like to do something like this, but they never followed through. And we weren't quite sure how we were going to be accepted in that. And we were invited to a picnic after a Dory Days in 2010. And we got to meet some of the people that were associated with the Dory fleet. And the next day we were invited back to Paul Hanneman's house to talk with him about this project. And Paul Hanneman was a co-director of the Dorymen's Association. He was a state legislator for 26 years in Oregon, and pretty influential in trying to pull people together and do different things. And he was also had created his own historical files, and he wasn't quite sure what was going to happen with them. So we had a meeting. When we got up there the next day, he had set up 5 or 6 foot tables that came out of his garage into the driveway, and on those tables on both sides there were notebooks and memorabilia and documents and pictures, and we spent probably 4 or 5 hours. We went up one side of the table and down the other side, and he talked about all these different things. And when we finished, he said, you know, is this something you want to try to do? And we said yes. And he asked Brenda, he said, you know, how would you like to maybe look at this stuff and try to document it? And we thought, well, we could bring a scanner up. We could set up in the garage if that was okay with him and scan different things and start the process that way. And he thought about it for a bit. And he said it would probably be easier for you if you were to take some of this stuff. And yes, it would be. And so we made an arrangement that we would take one notebook, and he had like 3 or 4 inch binders of different pages and different things. We would take one notebook at a time and go through it and do what we needed to do. Scan it, pass it on, whatever. And then once we finished that, we'd give it back to him and he'd give us another one. And so we started that. And that really was shocking to a lot of people because nobody could remember anybody ever taking anything out of Paul's house. And that was kind of a big deal. But that started the ball rolling. And that first summer, we had, I think, 4 students working with us that summer. Jackson, myself, and Brenda, and 4 students. And we would go over and spend 3 or 4 days in Pacific City at our house, and scheduling people to interview. And the first couple of weeks, you know, people would start to see a Linfield van around town. And after the first week or so, you know, it's a small community, so everybody talks with everybody. And there was a friendliness that was developed. And we would be down on the beach and would interview people down there. And people started to see that we were interested in this, and we were taking it pretty seriously. And it made it every experience made it easier to do the next schedule for the next thing. And so, even though it's just Brenda and I working on this now, it's something where we have met so many people and had conversations, and we've become friends with a lot of these people in trying to create this this thing that we didn't think we were starting at the beginning. 2 years ago, there was the Dory Days, which is their summer festival, was recognized as the 13th state heritage event in Oregon. The Pendleton Roundup is one of those. I can't name off all the different heritage events, but this is now a heritage event. And one of the things that was noted from for their being chosen for that was this project, as far as trying to capture the history of the Dory fleet. And the other thing is you have to be in existence for at least 50 years. Well, they've been in existence for more than 50 years. And so there is that history. And it's an important thing to try to capture. And we're pretty proud that we were able to start that. and make that happen. And to me, it's one of the most significant things that I think that I've done. Designing shows and working on shows is one thing, but trying to capture this, whatever the history is important. And it's been something that has really meant something both to, I think, myself, but our students that have worked on the project. The first interview was with a guy that was 83 years old, and I walked out of that and I thought, you know, this is going to be a project that's going to be significant in trying to make it all come together. Just to do a play. Remember, we're just going to do a play right then. And then it is expanded. And when we did the play here, there were, in the 7 performances, there was Dorymen and women at every performance. Not, you know, maybe 5 or 10 or 15, but there was a representation at every performance. And the Sunday matinee, we designed that particular year just for the Dorymen. And so everybody that was in attendance was a Dory person for that matinee. And we had a reception afterwards, and it was really neat to see all of them in a different environment than what they're used to, and being on the beach or fishing or whatever. And then after we closed that, the following weekend we took it to Pacific City and set it up and did it in the community center over there, which is nowhere near being a theater type of space, and had 125 people see it there, which was as many as we could put in there that night. So, you know, it's been that was a neat thing.
Well, you said that it's a kind of a living organism because people are still like to be more Dorymen and stuff. What is your goal for this project? Like, what do you want this project to end up as, and how would you like people to use it or to continue to make it grow?
I don't think that there's any set number of people that we need to have on there, so I don't know if there's any numbers. I would just like it to be more substantial than what it is right now. I've kind of also referred to it as kind of a crazy quilt. Everybody has their own history. Every family has their own history. And when you put together a crazy quilt, there's not a pattern necessarily. There's just all these things that come together. And usually there's a palette, there's a color that all works, and the shapes all kind of work together. That's what I think that this thing is going to be when it's done, is another crazy quilt where everybody's story has come together. Right now there's, I think, 35 or 45 oral stories that are on the Commons. You know, it would be great to have another 200 or 300, 400. And I think we can do that. We've got the material to do that with. We also have some video stories that are there, and it would be nice to have another 100 video stories. There's at least another 20 people that we need to interview. I'm glad that we've interviewed the people that we have, because we've lost, I think, 4 or 5 since we started this project. And once you lose a person, well, you can never get their stories. You can only get the memories from a family member or something like that. Before we started this project, there was people that were significant in the history of the Dory fleet that had passed away. We'll never be able to get their stories. So trying to get as much as we can, and I don't know what that is. I can't quantify that. I would just like to get it further down the road. I'd just like to get more. I know that we have so much material, and if we get any more material, well, then there's more that we have to work on. And I'm not complaining about that. that's just part of to me. Working on a play, it's the hunt. It's what you have to find to get the design completed for the show. It's the hunt. It's trying to find the different things that you can pull in to help tell just one little portion of a family story. And one of the things that is really neat, at the boat ramp going down to the beach where they put in, there's a memorial wall. And most memorial walls celebrate people that have passed away or died at sea or something like this. This memorial wall celebrates all of the boats that have been part of the Dory fleet. And so the names of the boats are on the wall. That's what those names are. And they have just added 2 more wings to be able to put more boat names on that were inadvertently left off the first time, and ones to come in the future. And there's also a section that are for people that have given significant contributions to the association over the years, whether those have been fish buyers or boat builders or who knows what. And that type of thing is what I'm hoping that this project will start to be, something that adds to that memorial wall. So
I hope so too.
Yeah.
So going back to Linfield just for a second.
Yeah.
So you're talking about you and Brenda first came here in 1987. What was the theater program like at the time?
I was probably the first traditional designer that you think about ever hired by the college. Previous to my coming, in 1980, Tom Gressler was hired as a full-time tenure-track theater director and theater historian scholar. Prior to his coming, Ted Diesel was a person that helped do theater, helped to make plays and put things together. And there's a history that goes back prior to Ted. Believe it or not next year, but the year after will be the 100th year of theater at Linfield. So that there's quite a bit of history that goes back. But the recent history is Ted Diesel and Tom. And when Tom came, he helped to develop a major and a minor. Up until that time, there wasn't a major in theater. It was just a co-curricular activity, pretty much. And so the major was begun in the early 80s. And when Ted left, they were able to put together a position that would be a designer position. And so that's the position that I came in as. And so was Tom and myself to begin with. And I think it was in the late 60s, early 70s, 68, 69, 70, somewhere in there. The building the theater was in burnt down. Music and theater shared a building, and it burnt. Music was able to go into Renshaw with the art department. And so they were able to have a home. Theater didn't have a home, and there was a place that was on the second floor of Pioneer that used to be the college reading room. It has now gone back to a reading room, but it was the reading room, and it was turned into a theater in the early 70s, I think, late 60s, early 70s. So when I came here, that reading room space that was all painted black. We had flats that were painted black that were over the large windows, because theater, you want to have a black space so that you don't have any influence of light from the outside and things like that. And so when I came, that's where theater production was. And it was kind of a challenge. There was not a shop. I mean, that's the space that we had. It was a rehearsal space, it was a classroom space, it was a shop space, it was everything. And there was a little room that was off to the side that was about 8 feet wide and 10 feet long, and it was the paint room. The only reason it was a paint room is it had a sink with running water. And around the corner was a little room that was a dressing room that somebody, probably Ted, built makeup mirrors. There was 8 stations, 4 on each side. You had to really squeeze in to get around the makeup table and so on. And there was a place to store some props. And costumes was in the basement of Newbie. And the basement of Newbie always flooded. So there was, every once in a while in the spring, there was silt that came across the floor and some water trickled through. And so the facility for theater was not very nice. But it's not the facility that makes up something, it's the people that are inside of that. And it's faculty, it's staff, it's students. And if you all kind of buy into something and try to create something, you can be in the worst possible facility, but still make art that is worth making. And so I started in '87, and the first play I designed was a play called El Grande de Coca-Cola. And there was no English spoken. It was mostly Spanish with a little bit of French, touch of German. And we literally took out everything that was in that room and turned it into a Mexican nightclub. And with a stage at one end. And we had dogs and chickens and people and actors, and it was a pretty fun event. But that space, I never thought about it as a space that you couldn't do anything in. It's what you have available to you. And I always thought about it as it's a room that's 32 feet wide, and so it's a proscenium arch that's 32 feet wide, you know, and you can go wall to wall. And our grid was 15 feet tall. Well, okay, 15 feet, you can go up 15 feet. Yeah, how do you fill that space up? I never really thought about it as something that was a hindrance. And so, 17 years in that space, we were challenged to do a lot of things, but we did some good work. We were able to have our students have recognition through ACTF, Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. We had shows that were invited to regional festivals. We've had students be involved in different acting, designing competitions and things over the years. And all of those experiences allow for a student to learn more and to get experience in whatever is of an interest for them. And being at an educational institution, that's what it's all about. And being at a liberal arts institution, we don't have traditional tracks that you're only an actor, you're only a director, you're only a designer. Everybody does a little bit of everything. And I think that that's one of the strengths of our program, is that everybody does everything. And it allows a student to be able to carry on a conversation with somebody about theater that's more broad than just one small thing. And it allows a student to gain experience in lots of different things. And all of those help a student once they graduate. And we've had students that have gone on to grad school for design, for theater history, for directing, for acting. We've had students that have gone out and been involved in the Portland theater scene for 15, 20 years and have been successful at doing one thing or another. And that's what it's all about. We've also had students that have just gone out and gotten other jobs that didn't have anything to do with theater, and that's okay too. I mean, you want to have a student be prepared for whatever the next step is, while not knowing while they're here what that next step might be. Some students have an idea, well, I want to go do this. Other students don't have a clue, and that's okay. So when I first came, the Pioneer Theater was kind of a dingy, dark hole that didn't allow a lot of things, potentially allow a lot of things to happen. And our audience capacity was 68. It started out when I first came, it was at 80, and then the fire marshal came in and he got kind of upset, and so we had to put in another exit, which took away 12 seats. 12 seats is, a lot, but if somebody says you're going to have to do something or shut down, well, you do something and you keep that part going. So Pioneer gave us a lot of challenges, but I think that we were fairly successful at those challenges. And it then allowed us at some point in time, it's been now, I guess, 14 or 15 years that we've been in this space. And when we moved over here, it allowed our students to have other experiences that we didn't have before. To be able to have sound gear, to be able to work on soundscapes for plays, and have more lighting gear and equipment to be able to do a traditional lighting design that most people would think about, to do costuming, to work on the craft of acting. The space has allowed us to do that. And as I mentioned a second ago, our students have been recognized with ACTF to be able to, we've had, I think 9 or 10 students that over the years that have gone on to the Kennedy Center for one competition or another, either in acting or lighting design or costume design or sound design. And those types of experiences have added to their knowledge base and skills and have opened up other things for them, which, going to a little small liberal arts college that started out in Pioneer, it's been a great experience. And we've actually had one national Irene Ryan winner, which is the main acting competition. We've had a couple of others that have been involved at the Kennedy Center that way. I've had 3 lighting design students go, a couple of costume design students. So I've gone on and gotten away from your answer, but that's what our question. But those are the things that I remember coming out of Pioneer. Mm-hmm. And what I continue to remember with students that have done things in this theater here.
Yeah. In either theater, are there particular sets that you did or helped students with, or certain plays that are really memorable over your years here? Yeah. One that's memorable, and it's probably because it's the one that just happened not long ago. Savannah Hurst designed Ada and the Engine in the fall. I thought she did a great job in doing that show. Rosalie Olson designed costumes for the same show.
Rosalie, both of them received Meritorious Achievement Awards at the regional festival. Rosalie was chosen to go to the Kennedy Center. So she went back there for that. Stop the World, I think, is one of the ones that's pretty memorable. Stop the World, I Want to Get Off is a musical that we did, my guess is in the early 90s. But it was the first show that was invited to go to a regional festival. And we had to rebuild it during Jan term. Remember, we've got this little theater that's 32 feet wide, and the stage space was about 19 feet. So a very small space. The regional festival was held in Bellingham in a theater that sat 1,200, and the stage was like 45 feet across and 30 feet deep, and it was the opposite of what we did here. And so during Jan term, we took the same design but expanded it so that it would proportionally fit into that space. And in fact, the model for that is right up there. And the only time we saw that play, that set together, was in Bellingham. It was only put together one time, and that was in Bellingham, because there was no place on campus to put it up fully. But it was based on the same design that we did in Pioneer. That Jan term was also the time where the gym in Riley was still there, but was not being used. They had moved over to the new athletic complex. And at the end of Jan term, we were able to take and do a final dress rehearsal of the play, and we set up about 70% of the set in the gym. But there was parts of the floor that we couldn't put in because of the way their stage was and the way that I designed it came out over an orchestra pit. So we couldn't get everything up, but we got probably 75 or 80%. And we did a final dress rehearsal before we packed up the next day to go to the festival. And there was no heat in Riley, January, and everybody came in, and they had their coats and everything. I think we probably had 50 or 75 people in the audience for that rehearsal. You could see her breath at the beginning of the day, or the evening or afternoon when we did it. A mass of people finally made it so that there was a little bit of warmth in there and stuff. But I guess that's probably one of the things I really remember is that show and taking it to Bellingham. We've taken over the years 6 shows to regional festivals. There was a 7th one that we were invited, but it was when Tom was still here. We just didn't think that we could put it back together during Jan term, because again, Tom and I both felt that if you're going to do a show at a festival, you're invited, you need to do it the best way, the best that you can. You just can't throw it back together. And so we, at that point in time, really always had to rebuild everything in Jan term. And Dangerous Liaisons, we just didn't think that we could rebuild and put it back together the way that it needed to be for that festival. So that was one that was invited, but we didn't take it.
I'm not quite sure what the name is for the style the theater is currently, but it goes often a little bit more into the actual audience. Has that been a problem taking that to festivals since it's not in traditional style?
No. The one thing about our space is what you're talking about is the flexibility to be able to do a show either in a proscenium style or thrust, which is what you're asking about, or an arena play where you have audience on all 4 sides. That's the really nice thing about working, one of the nice things about working in this space. We have taken thrust shows and taken them into a festival because we've gone to a space that would allow that same type of presentation style. Although when we did Neighborhood 3, which is the last one at Central Washington, we had to rebuild it because there was a thing to, there were houses, little small miniature houses that were part of the set that were electrified. There was lighting instruments inside of it so that it would give some glows and different things. It was a play that incorporated a lot of video games and that type of thing. And so we had to rebuild the floor for that. And when we rebuilt it, we just we took out the platform that we ran all the wire underneath and just used plywood and then channeled out the underside of the plywood to allow us to run our cables to get lights where we needed to have them. And just repainted the floor. We used everything else that we had for the set. We just had to redo the floor. But you know, that in itself was a kind of a big deal to try to do that. But we try, you know, now it's a little bit easier. You don't have to redo everything. But when we were in Pioneer, we had to redo a lot of stuff. But you know, that's part of what you do.
You talked about this a little bit already, but what is one of your favorite things about teaching and working with students?
Wow. Every student is different. And each student has their own interest. And so trying to figure out how they incorporate themselves into something that's specific for them, but also to have to learn about the secondary types of things that will affect what they do. So for an actor to take scenic design or lighting design, which is totally out of their comfort zone, is always a challenge. But I think that it's important that they know about what a designer has to do, a scenic or lighting designer, because they have to be able to work in a scenic design. They have to be able to find their light or work with the light that a lighting designer will create for a show. And in so doing, that, I hope, makes their craft a little bit more informed. It will also allow them to be able to do what I said a little bit ago, have a conversation, ask the right question. Is it possible to do that whatever, okay, to make this a stronger thing, whatever that is. So that is always a challenge for me, but it's one that I think is an important thing to help them understand. The other flip side of that is there are students that come through or that have come through that are interested in scenic design, interested in lighting design. And now you have to switch gears just a little bit more and challenge them in a way that they would be challenged in a professional setting, and get them prepared to be able to walk into a theater or walk into a shop and carry on the conversation that they need to carry on, but also to develop the design elements that are important for whatever their ideas are for a play. And so it's kind of a juggling act in some cases, but it's something that is it goes back to that idea that it's part of the hunt. You know, what is going to help you as a student to move yourself forward, develop your skills, develop whatever it is that is an important thing to you. And as a faculty person, to help try to get to that part, to help a student understand. And remember, I put my finger down on a map and ended up in a place that I had no clue about. students are the same. That's me as a student. But the students we have today and have had are in the same situation. I'm going to be a theater major, or even not a theater major. I'm going to come over and I'm going to work on lights, or I'm going to come over and be in a show. Well, you still have to understand what it takes to do that. And being at a liberal arts school, to be able to incorporate students that are from other disciplines across campus into what we're doing here, that's an exciting thing. It's exciting because they're learning something, but it's also exciting because the students that are a theater major are learning something from them that they're bringing in from wherever. You know, that's the exciting thing. And over the years, there have been students that, there was a student that I haven't heard from in almost 30 years. He was a physics major, but he came and did work study in the theater with lighting. And he worked with me the first year. And I'm glad that he was there because he kind of had an idea of how things worked in the theater in Pioneer, because he'd been over there. That was his senior year, my first year. And it was neat to work with him. I heard from him, I've heard from him twice in 30 years. The second time was about a month ago when he read in the Linfield magazine that I was retiring. He made a contact. That was neat to be able to hear that. And so there was that connection that we had only for a year, but there have been students along the way that we've had 3 or 4, sometimes 5 years of a connection while they've been here. And so that's been an exciting thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a teaching philosophy that you try to bring to your classes? Because, for example, I've heard you're a very particular and detail-oriented professor, especially in some certain classes with some small designs. Is there a certain philosophy that you bring to any teaching that when you're working with students?
There is one textbook that I use fairly regularly in most classes that helps set up a basis for a lot of the things that I do. And from a Michael Gillette book, there's a 7-step design process. And so commitment, research, evaluation, those types of things. Commitment. If you're going to have your name on a program, I would hope that you would do the best possible work, because people are going to see that you're responsible for that. Am I successful in all that? No, but I try to be, and I try to, we're only human. I make mistakes. I don't plan to do that, but I want to be a mentor. I want to be an example for a student. And so part of my philosophy is to be that example, to try and hold students to a high standard. Think about detail. Think about the words that you use to describe the idea that you want to convey. All of that to be able to help a student learn, use the vocabulary that is in this industry, and to carry on that conversation and be able to ask questions and make it a comfortable environment. While I think some students would think that I don't make it a comfortable environment, but I try to, believe it or not. But I want them to make the choices. I've designed it. I've done that before. You haven't. You have to make the choice. And once you make that choice, now you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to support that choice? Is that the right choice for the play or not? And if it is, great, keep going. If it's not, well, evaluation, that's one of those steps. You have to always evaluate and make sure that if you go down the road this way and it's not going to quite take you where you need to go, it's okay to back up and go take the fork that goes to the right instead of the one that goes to the left. You know, so common sense, attention to detail, thinking about the process, trying to expose students to those things. While they're very specific to theater, they're also kind of specific to life. And whatever you're going to do past Linfield. And, you know, all of that's important. So I guess that's, in a roundabout way, my little nutshell about what I ask of a student, my philosophy of theater.
Over the years here at Linfield, you've worked mostly with two directors, Tom and Janet, along with some other guest directors. What is it like building the relationships with specifically those two people and working so intently on all these plays?
Well, just like everything, it's communication. Mm-hmm. When I say you, I'm actually talking about me. I think that you have to understand what somebody means when they say red or blue, or I need something this big, or you have an idea, or I do, but I need to know what their idea is. And so I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes it is, what do you mean by red? You know? And we have to find red. We have to find what that means, because that will be an important thing somewhere down the line. And after a while, you don't have to spend a lot of time talking, because you can say 3 or 4 or 5 different things, and boom, you're already halfway down the road. You know where it is that you need to go. But early on, you have to really communicate and understand and not be afraid to ask the question. I mean, there's been plenty of times where I have thought, even this year, I know exactly what the answer is, but then I ask the stupid question, well, what do you mean by that? And I get something totally, wow, where'd that come from? Okay, well, they're the director, so now I have to help support what their vision is. I can introduce some things, and I can bring some of my ideas forward, but if it's not what they have that will support them, then I have to make a change. I have to do something. So, you know, it's part of that communication. And understanding what people mean. And to me, that's one of the reasons why I do models. Because when I paint a model, they can see what red is. Mm-hmm. They can see how much room there is or not. And if it's not there in the model, then, well, you can cut a model up. You can break it apart. You can rebuild it. I mean, it's a whole lot simpler to do that than it is to build the set and find out, oh, that's not the way it wants to be. Okay, now I've just wasted $1,000 on that, and now how am I going to, you know, there's other things that come up. Mm-hmm. So understanding, communication, understanding the play. Don't be afraid to go to rehearsals so that you can see what they're doing in a rehearsal. It doesn't mean you have to stay for the entire time. I'll walk in and spend 15, 20 minutes, half hour watching a scene, see how the actors are working, see how the director is working with those people, where they're putting people. and that helps inform me. That's part of that communication too. But it's on stage and it's a real life thing, and so I take that. Oh, that's what they mean by walking up over there. Can we come back in? Can we? You know, you're always having to try to manipulate everything, and I say that in a positive way, to be able to make the experience work for the actor and also potentially work for the audience. Because if the audience doesn't understand it and doesn't get it, then you've got a problem. All right, you have to make sure that the audience is going to understand what is being said and what is meant by one thing or another.
What are you the proudest of from your time working in the theater? You mentioned the Dory project, but is there another thing that you're really proud of?
This may sound egotistical, and I don't mean it to be. I think that it's not that every show has been perfect, but I've been really proud of what I've accomplished with my work as a designer and my work with students. That's what I've been proud of. And there was a reception that was held in May, and I don't know, there was probably about 100 people that came back, and a number of them were students. Most of them were students. And to see them, some even from the second year I was here, so 30 years ago, come back to visit, to be here, was meaningful. And so, working with students and seeing them, that's what I'm proud of.
You've designed hundreds and hundreds of shows. What was it like designing your last show for Linfield?
It was, just like every other show. It was a challenge. Going into this year, and when we chose the season for this year, we didn't choose Silent Sky because it was going to be my last show. It wasn't until it got into the fall that I realized that this was my last year. And so it just so happened that Silent Sky was the last show that I designed here. It was just like any other. It was a challenge to do, but I kept thinking, you know, the playwright had all these descriptive words in the play that this would fall away and that would come up and this would go this way or that way. And I was thinking, how are we going to do that in this space for what we're doing? And so that challenge was there, that hunt was there to figure out the best way we could do it with what we had available. And so it was a process, and I built that model twice. The first part of the model, when I built it, before I painted it and everything, I sat down and talked with Janet. I said, well, this is what we've kind of talked about to this point in time, but I don't like this. And when I read a play, I see actors in certain places, and so there are letter sequences. The playwright has written letter sequences into the show where a character will be writing a letter to somebody else. And so now we're stepping out of the environment that we're in to a time that is in the past, or maybe right now, but in a different place. And when I read the play, I saw in my mind those actors that are doing those letter sequences in very specific places that weren't on the stage floor. They were up in the air somewhere. I didn't know where they were, but they were up in the air. And we could separate them because of light from the other actors. And I said to Janet, I said, and I would just like to see those people all of a sudden appear. And to be able to accomplish that, then, you know, we made walls and stuff in this model and stuff. And I got that all done, and I hated it. And I said, well, Janet, this is what we've talked about, but I really don't like this. I would like to get rid of this, this, and this. But if we do that, then it's going to be incumbent upon her during rehearsal to make the actor be able to get to that location in the sight line of the audience, which means that the actor is going to have to be in character. It's going to have to do their movements in relationship with how that character would move to get from here up to there, get from here up to here. And so that communication and that whole experience to try to be able to turn the set around, to add stuff, to change it from one place to another, to be able to get the people to be up in the air, to be able to see them, to do whatever. That challenge was a lot like other plays. But then as the whole thing went on, and it became the last one that I was going to do, that also brought some significance to it for me personally. But it was the perfect show from my perspective to do as the last one, because of all of the things that was asked and of the script and the environment. And so I couldn't have chosen, if I had to choose a play, and I never choose a play. I let other people choose plays that they want to do, because I've always felt that as a designer, your job is to do whatever you're asked to do. And so people will ask me, what play do you want to design? I could care less. It doesn't make any difference what play it is. I just like to design it. Mm-hmm. Now, there are certain plays that I don't want to design, or certain playwrights that I'd rather not do, and I'm not going to say who those are now. But I don't mind doing almost anything. So to have Silent Sky be the last one, I felt was in the end, was a really good one to do, because it asked a lot, and I thought that it was successful in the way that it turned out. And yeah, I also remember going into meetings. If you read the play, the script, Gunderson's near the end says she has Henrietta talking about different astronomers, Hubble and all these different people. You could have projections, so you saw all these pictures, but then to introduce that in the last 30 seconds of the play, and you've not done any projections up until that point in time, doesn't seem to make any sense. Mm-hmm. But you also have to do something about the sky, and how are you going to make the sky, and how are you going to make the stars? And that potentially will also be a projection type of thing. But none of that seemed to be what I thought was an important part. And Jan had this idea of, well, maybe we could use, she had a couple of ideas, and I didn't think that they would work very well. Mechanically, I didn't think it would work really easily, and so we kept kicking things around. And she said something about light bulbs, and I said, well, that's a neat idea, but if we were to do light bulbs, they need to be vintage light bulbs, so that you can see the filaments on the inside. Because stars, while they're all kind of sort of the same, they're all different, and they all shine differently, and they twinkle differently, and through the play we find out a little bit about some of that. And so we thought, well, will use light bulbs as our stars instead of doing projections of the sky. And so we hung 100 light bulbs in the theater, vintage light bulbs. And that also added to the overall look of the play because they were always there. The playwright says this, that the stars should always, whether they're on or off, should always kind of be there. And I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but when you hang 100 light bulbs in a space, well, they're always going to be there, whether they're on or they're off. And so I thought that that helps satisfy that particular note from the playwright when she wrote it. So there was lots of things about Silent Sky, but I'm glad it was the last one. Yeah, rather than trying to plan, in a year in advance, the last play, whatever that is. So the next one up. Yeah.
So now you're retiring or retired. What's in the future for you? What are you going to be doing?
Well, there's some program history that I want to do. One of the things that I haven't been able to keep up with over the years is while I've taken production shots of all of our shows, I've not put them together in a way that is easy to access and finished totally. So I want to spend time going over some of the images from the past and get them more organized and a way for people to use. Again, that's going to help add to that 100th year history. Working on the Dory project is, again, something that is high up on my list. And I've been a photography hobbyist for 45 years, and I have never taken a class, but I've just learned by doing, and I want to do more photography. I want to be able to spend time taking some pictures and do it in a way that is more specific rather than catching something here and there. Plan out some things a little bit more. When the school year is going, there are 9 months out of the year that the only time I pick up a camera is to take production shots. And then in the summertime I can go someplace and maybe take some shots and then try to work and manipulate those. So photography is going to be something I want to get back to and do some more work with and be one of my creative outlets.
What do you think is in the future, or what do you hope is in the future for the theater department?
I wish I had a crystal ball, but I don't. I hope that it continues to build. The last 30 years have been a growing experience in both facilities and in creating this thing we call art and call theater. We added a new faculty line this past year. I think that Lindsay will add more into the program from her interest. While I enjoy and love making theater and painting and doing lighting and things like that, I think it's time that somebody else were to take that and move it forward. Hopefully it's in a way that will expand and inform the program overall. So I hope that it keeps going. I think that these 30 years have been positive years in creating different styles and workings and going from one facility to another. I hope the next 30 to 40 to 50 or whatever years continues that journey, moving theater forward and finding students and helping students create their passion for whatever part of theater is important to them.
What do you hope is in the future for Linfield as a whole?
I just hope that it continues to be a strong institution. This has been a special thing for me and Brenda as an institution where we have been able to grow and give to the institution. The institution also has given things to us as far as a place to work and a way to help influence students in making decisions. And I hope that it continues to keep moving forward in a positive way, helping students find whatever it is that they are looking for, whatever they think is important to themselves, so that they can better prepare themselves for whatever their next steps are.
So what advice would you have for a freshman that's coming into Linfield?
Look around, go to the institutions that you think you are interested in, talk to the students that are there, and then come back here and talk to the students that are here. Because they are in the position that you're going to be for 4 years. And if you feel comfortable with the answers that they give you and the visit that you have while you're here, I think that you'll choose Linfield. Speaking for our program, we have tried to foster a family atmosphere, an atmosphere where a student can come and be comfortable in working, and they have found a home here, and that is an important thing. And I think that a student will find something here that is challenging, informative, and comfortable, and a place where you can always have fun too, and maybe learn something. But no, it's a special place.
Well, that's all the questions we have. Is there
Thank
anything
goodness.
else?
No.
You want to say? No more. Okay, well, thank you so much
thank
for
you.
doing this interview with us.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been fun doing this. It's been fun being here. It's been fun being part of this community. So, thanks.